That's why the threat of strike action by resident doctors is so concerning, because it risks plunging the progress we're making into reverse. It's the last thing the NHS needs. It's the last thing the country needs. I also think it's the last thing that NHS staff need, because those achievements I mentioned, they're not simply the government's achievements. Yes, we've put in place the resources and the reform, but ultimately the care is being delivered by the staff themselves, and we couldn't do it without them. And so here we are with the threat of 5 days of strike action at the end of this month. And what I cannot understand, and I think other NHS staff, let alone the country, can't understand, is how, after having had a 28.9% pay increase from this government, resident doctors are now saying we're going out on strike. There isn't a precedent for this in the history of British trade unions.
But there is also a precedent for the wages of doctors to go under 40% compression between 2008 and today. That's the thing, right? Is that this is unprecedented times, therefore unprecedented action is taken. Remember, that 28% was something that you negotiated them down to, right? They're originally going for pay restoration that you didn't give them. That you negotiated them down, knowing that they were looking for more than you gave them. So you must have assumed, one would imagine, given that you're supposed to be the party that represents the trade union movement, that when you've negotiated them down from the actual pay restorations, they're still getting paid less in real terms than they were in 2008, that you then might need to be able to negotiate with them again, so you get somewhere closer to pay restoration, given however many years they've been taking real terms pay cuts for under Conservative austerity governments.
Let's see what they think and what they want to ask you about it. Shivam has called from Fulham. Hello, Shivam.
Hello there. Hi, so Mr. Streeting, I have a question for you. You previously said that full pay restoration is a journey, but your current offer is only 0.9% above inflation. And that means that full pay restoration at this pace would take over 20 years. Do you think that's acceptable? If not, what's an acceptable time frame for you?
And that's the thing. Again, this is about pay restoration. They're not asking for pay rises. When Wes Streeting says things like, well, yeah, they've already had this big pay rise, how dare they come back looking for more? They still haven't had any actual pay rises because it's still lower in real terms than it has been for over decades, you know? That's the important point. That was part of the pay restoration. The doctors accepted that it couldn't happen all at the same time. They're coming asking for the remainder of that, the journey that you said you'd take them on, and you're now trying to castigate them for using industrial action when you don't play ball. That's the whole point of trade unions.
So, Shivam, in terms of the figure you just mentioned, the pay award that resident doctors have had for this year averages out at 5.4%. And that is the highest award in the entire public sector. Taken together with the deal we did with the BMA last year, that's a 28.9% pay increase.
Mr. Streeting,
now,
what is an acceptable time frame?
Let him answer your question. I will get back to you, Shivam.
I accept the argument that you and your colleagues in the BMA are making, that your pay has been eroded over more than a decade by the Conservatives. I mean, not literally your pay, 'cause you wouldn't have been in the NHS all of that time, but the pay for your part of the profession has been eroded. And the same is also true for nurses, for consultants, for other NHS and social care staff, for the entire public sector. And that's why I'm proud that when we came in, not only did we do the deal with resident doctors, but the entire public sector has had real terms pay rises. All I ask you to consider is two things. One is that the public finances are under real pressure.
It's also worth pointing out, this is why the nurses shouldn't have folded when they did. This is why it was really important that people like Pat Cullen, people like the negotiators from Unison, shouldn't have caved and recommended the crappy pay deal to their nurses all those years ago, right? By accepting too low of a nominal pay increase, which was still technically every real terms cut over the inflationary period, they have therefore kneecapped the negotiating ability of every single other area in the healthcare service. Because then every single public sector official just like Wes Streeting is doing now, and just like people like Victoria Atkins and Steve Barclay did under the Conservatives, can say, well, the nurses accepted the crappy pay deal, so you should accept them too. You're trying to say you should deserve more than the nurses, which is why there needs to be proper solidarity and organising between trade unions to ensure that this doesn't happen. Because in the public mind, it is already looking like the doctors seem to be wanting more than their fair share compared to other professions in the public sector, as these strikes aren't as well supported in the public as they were under the Tories. There was far more sympathy for resident doctor strikes 2 years ago. In fact, majority support, not even plurality support, which does not exist at the moment. And actually, there is plurality opposition to current doctor strikes, even though the reality, of course, is that these strikes are necessary to ensure that we keep the talent in the UK. When it comes to the mobility of the rich, whenever we talk about taxation, this number one response you get is, well, you can't tax the rich, the wealthy, the people who own assets, the millionaires and billionaires. They're mobile and they'll leave, right? When, of course, for a lot of these people, the overall level of taxation doesn't affect their standard of living, and so it's not really a lot of a concern for them in the long run. Yet when it comes to doctors, when their talents are in far more of a short supply and are far more critical for the functioning of society, they are just, if not more, mobile than the rich, because they can get incredibly easy visas in countries like, I don't know, Australia to go and practice medicine. And so if they get a better pay offer, they're more likely to take it, because actually a better pay offer is significant in terms of their quality of life, where it wouldn't be for taxing the rich. Yet our public discourse endlessly talks about all the millionaires who are leaving, who aren't actually leaving, yet doctors are leaving. Doctors are leaving this country to go to Australia in numbers that are not insignificant. Yet we never talk about the fact that we are competing globally in a market for medical professionals, which we aren't doing for billionaires. Really weird how these people who are very critical for the functioning of our economy and for the functioning of our society never get this treatment, yet the millionaires and billionaires, who are completely irrelevant to the functioning of the country, get pandered to incessantly. Funny that, isn't it?
So we're doing as much as we can, as fast as we can. And secondly, it's not just the pay that we have to contend with, it's also the conditions. You don't need me to tell you, because you're working in it, the sort of conditions that NHS staff are subjected to in terms of the bricks and mortar, the fabric, the building, the kit and the equipment. And that's not just true for our National Health Service. We'd be having the same conversation about our schools, about our prisons, about the entire public sector. So no, Shivam, I have not been able to overturn more than a decade of pay erosion in 1 year. But 28.9% is not only a good start, it is not the condition on which you and your colleagues should be walking out on strike. And I'll say something else to you. And
the original question was about what the actual time frame should be, which you've not answered. Because, of course, he's a Labour minister. They never answer questions.
My question back to you is, when you're out on strike at the end of this month, standing out on the picket line protesting a 28.9% pay increase, what's your message to the patients whose operations and appointments and procedures will be delayed and cancelled? And also, what's your message to other NHS staff who will be inside picking up the pieces, having received a lower pay award than you, and in many cases, working on lower pay? I don't think that's fair. I don't think these strikes are necessary, and I don't think the BMA's actions are reasonable.
And just before I hear
literally, it's Ed Miliband all over again. We're having the Ed Miliband redux. These strikes are wrong whilst negotiations are still going on. Remember that one? That continually repeated line from from Ed Miliband? Jesus Christ. And again, he's just pitting these people against each other, and it's only because Unison and the RCN capitulated on this stuff. And of course, you say the public finances are strained. Raise taxes. Put taxes up. They should go up. Like, do we want to have a healthcare service? Do we want the NHS staff to stay here? Right? Or do you want to play nicey-nicey with upper middle class people who happened to call at the last election?
From you, Shivam, and I will come back to you. Worth saying that almost 350,000 nursing staff in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will be asked to vote from Monday on a 3.6% pay rise. Shivam, your response?
I know that Mr. Streeting did actually answer my question, but this huge percentage increase...
I think he did. I think he did.
This huge percentage increase that Mr. Streeting's talking about is just an extra £4 an hour. 3 years ago, doctors were paid £14 an hour, and now we're paid around £18 an hour. And what we're asking for is a reverse of the pay cuts, as Mr. Streeting said, a journey to pay restoration, and for a doctor to be paid £22.67 an hour to deliver life-saving treatment, to restart people's hearts, to look after hundreds of patients overnight. £22.67 an hour. In fact, if Mr. Streeting agrees today to pay doctors, currently doctors are getting paid less than their assistants. If he agrees to pay doctors £22.67 an hour a day, and £22.67 an hour, you can call off the strikes. And I'll tell you what, you don't even have to do it all in one go. What do you say? £22.67 an hour, Mr. Streeting.
Over what period?
And thing is, as well as that's almost half, right? That's close to half the amount that Wes Streeting gets paid. Wes Streeting, the guy hasn't got a fucking clue what he's talking about, no experience in the medical sector at all, right? Only in this position because he's a darling of the Labour right. So you get the important position, we'll keep you there, and then we'll make you Prime Minister eventually, we promise, as long as you can win a leadership election. He gets paid almost double what the junior doctors are asking for, right? Or resident doctors, as they're now called, right? He earns almost double. 22.67 an hour, that's like double minimum wage. Minimum wage coming about 22 grand at the moment, I believe. That's about 44k, 45k, something like that. If my maths serves me correct, of course, that would be on full-time hours, and most doctors work more than full-time. But on just full-time hours, that's basically half of the over £90,000 a year that Wes Streeting gets paid to chat shit that he doesn't know about.
Period, Shivam.
Well, that's up to Mr. Streeting. What does he? That's the whole point of my initial question. But obviously, 20 years is not acceptable. I mean, that's obviously Mr. Streeting might not even be in power in 4 years.
Before Wes Streeting answers that, can I ask you something, and perhaps he'd like to reflect on it too once he's answered your question? What about your pensions? Pensions are very generous. Under the NHS scheme, staff contribute between 5 and 12% of their salaries. The state contributes, comparatively to other places, and certainly the private sector, 23.7% to your pension every year.
Yes, and our pensions have also been degraded because the pensions are based on
Still
our
better
pay.
than most.
And
Still
our
better
pay
than
has
most,
been
Shivam.
significantly eroded. And you try and tell a doctor that your pension, which you're going to get in about 50 years, doctors are struggling now.
No, it's growing now. That's the point. Way more than other people's.
Look, that's
And what's frustrating about this is that the kind of pensions the public sector get now, that's what private sector pensions used to be like in this country. And then, of course, neoliberalism happened, and now public sector pensions are the only good pensions left. I'm a millennial. My pension plan is societal collapse. That's my plan for retirement. Defined contribution schemes in this economy. Like, fair play, you point out, Sheila, that doctors' pensions are pretty high, public sector pensions are pretty good, right? That should be everyone's pensions. That's what pensions should be like for everybody. Why that's the sole preserve of the public sector now is a problem with the private sector being shit, not the public sector being quote-unquote too generous.
to start on the points of agreement. So look, I understand that last point, Shivam, which is talking about pensions when you retire doesn't pay the bills today. I totally understand that. I also accept the arguments that you and your colleagues have been making about pay erosion and also the conditions you've been working in terms of things like your rotations, your placements and the bottlenecks in career progression that mean it is now harder to progress on to the promise of becoming the consultants of the future, where if we can get you into promotion and onto consultant level, you're paid at that stage as a starting salary over £100,000 a year. So on that, I think we're all agreed. Now, in terms of where pay sits today, and this was before the 5.4% pay rise came in, a first-year resident doctor out of medical school would be paid £43,275 on average. That's more than the average worker in this country. For the second year out of medical school, it goes up just 1 year later to £52,300. In the core training years, it averages out at £67,000 a year, and specialty registrars are paid almost £75,000. And that doesn't take into account the employer pension contributions. Now, you are all highly skilled, qualified people, and we desperately need you in the NHS. So I don't discount all of those things for a moment. My reluctance to sit here and say, here's how we map out the journey to the pay restoration you're campaigning for, is I don't make promises I can't keep. And you will see the state of the public finances as they are today. And it would be, I think, really unfair for me to sit here and say, well, by the end of this parliament, we can get to X or Y, because I can't guarantee that the public finances would support it. And the second thing I would say is, in terms of the pay that's been awarded this year, it is the highest percentage pay increase across the public sector. We cannot afford to open that pay award. We just can't.
Do if you raise taxes, say, oh, well, look at the state of the public finances. You are in government. You have control over the public finances, right? Chancellor of the Exchequer, Labour Party MP, Rachel Reeves. Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Labour MP, Darren Jones, right? You have multiple people who have powers at their disposal to fix the public finances, to be able to give doctors a good pay award and to give them pay restoration. You have those powers at your disposal. Pretending that you don't, or that the Labour Party doesn't, obviously Wes Streeting is in health and social care, is nonsense. It's total nonsense. You could raise taxes if you really wanted to, but you don't want to. And it's as simple as that. And you're happy to lose doctors to Australia, given that's the case.
And even if we could, it would be unfair on the people who had a lower percentage pay increase and who are paid less, who are at the forefront of my mind because they are struggling to pay their bills even more. So
you could also increase their pay as well if you raise taxes. Just saying.
Those are the constraints I'm operating under. That doesn't mean that you know, in terms of the health secretary you've got to work with, I mean, quite genuinely, you've got a health secretary that is sympathetic to the arguments you're making, has worked with your predecessors to increase pay significantly by 28.9% in the first year that I've been in, and who wants to work with you to address all those other issues, the rotations, the placements, the bottlenecks, all of those other things. Honestly, do you think that the alternative that stares me across the face in the House of Commons will be better? You've got the ghost of Christmas Past and the Conservative Party that left you out in the cold and left you out on strike. And you've got the ghost of Christmas Future in the form of Nigel Farage and Reform, who don't even believe in the NHS and don't agree that I should have given you the money last year. So work with the partner you've got in front of you and call off these strikes. We can make progress. Don't set it back.
Okay.
And the final thing I'd say is there are choices and trade-offs. If doctors are out on strike and we're cancelling operations and appointments and inflicting that misery on patients, we're also paying a heavy price financially, and we're going to have to find the money from somewhere, and that limits my opportunity to do
doctors' pensions.
Well, it limits my opportunities to deal with the other issues they're talking about in terms of doctor unemployment, in terms.
Well, the thing as well, as I said, is that if we don't raise this pay so that it is at least somewhere closer to where they can get these wages overseas, you will lose them. Will lose them, and that's going to be a problem for you, Wes. That's going to be a problem. And it does really feel like what you hear at the general election of, well, you have to be nice to me because I'm not the Tories or Reform. I could be the Cyan or the Blue Party, and I'm the Red Party. That makes me the good party, so the grass is always greener, isn't it? It's just so frustrating that they will try and railroad you with this, well, you have to be nice to me because we're the good guys, we're the red team. I'm just like, just think about the reality of what's like for doctors on the ground and what it's like for the medical professional more broadly. Like, it's so frustrating, so frustrating to hear this constantly.
Of their ability to progress to consultant posts.
Would you look at that hefty pension? That was generous pension. 23. If my employer was putting 23% into my pension, I'd be dancing down the street.
Well, I mean, we've got this situation, Sheila, where the pension pot, by the time people become consultants, is so big that consultants lobby us to change the tax rules because they're taxed so heavily on the pensions because they're that valuable that they're like, oh, I might as well not bother working. My pension's so valuable. That's where we get to then. Now, if the BMA want to come to me and say, do you know what? Given that challenge, we think we would rather have a slightly less generous pension in order to have higher pay today.
You'll talk to
those
them.
are the sorts of issues you can get into in a discussion. But I've offered to talk. They haven't taken me up, and that's one of many reasons I think it's unreasonable.
We've given a bit rightly, I think.
That one again. That's something I'm kind of more likely to be sympathetic to Wes on this one when it comes to the fact that pensions being so high that doctors retire early. Like, we want doctors to be working more, so any disincentive for that is a bad thing. So switching things round to avoid that situation, I don't think that's unreasonable, right? But the big sticking point here is the current pay right now and the pay restoration, which he, again, still hasn't answered the question properly on when he thinks that's actually going to be suitable or is even going to be achievable. He still hasn't answered this.
given a big chunk of time to that issue because it's so important. After the break, you'll hear from Mo, who has a question about her local hospice in Liverpool. And again, important things for us to know before we hear from Mo. Hospice UK, which represents more than 200 hospices, say many are having to make the tough decision to close. Last year, 1 in 5 hospices warned of service cuts, 300 beds taken out of commission, virtual hospices replacing real physical.
It's also worth pointing out as well that when Wesley was tweeting out about this, he said, oh, well, most BMA resident doctors didn't vote to go on strike. There's not grounds for strike action when, you know, the actual turnout was 55% with a 90% yes vote for strike action, right? So that is almost half of the doctors turning out to actually say yes, and then lots of people just didn't vote. Well, given that Wes Streeting is the MP for Ilford North on 33% of the vote off of a 60% turnout, well, this industrial dispute has far more of a democratic mandate than you do in your own constituency, Wes. It's only 500 votes, mate. It's only 500 votes. You should definitely watch your back for the next election because Leanne Mohammed's coming to get you. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.